Alrighty, so this presentation is about self-regulated deep learning with NIST documents in higher ed. And the first part of this presentation will be a little bit more about pedagogy. Self-regulated deep learning. So what are we really going to talk about in this one? It's a long set of slides, but I'm not going to go through all of it. It's more for resources to keep afterwards, to contact me with. I would love to hear your ideas of what you do, and we can share this. I'm totally based in open education, so all of my stuff is Creative Commons license. Feel free to use it, adapt it, do whatever you want with it. So in this presentation, we're going to do a little bit on the pedagogical foundations regarding critical thinking skills, because that's sort of the be all and end all of higher education. And then go through some specific examples, and that will answer some of the questions from the previous presentation. And when we talk about pedagogical foundations for critical thinking, we're talking about the deep self-regulated learning. So students know how to pace themselves and do the types of learning that our science has proven is best for our brains, just no matter what type of learner we are. And also increase engagement. Really, that's the key word for online learning, but it's also been the key word in the COVID situation that a lot of folks are struggling with regarding engagement. And you need all of that. You need engagement and deep regulated learning in order to foster critical thinking. Won't read all of this for you, but basically critical thinking, and there are a variety of definitions. This one is taken from a Delphi panel that's been well recognized. And it's really about purposeful judgment, right? That you can assess and evaluate something and provide an explanation of your methodology or your evidential bases for that evaluation. It also includes your imagination and your collaborative abilities, your persistence, and we can see this reflected in our core competencies and accreditation criteria for many programs and professions. It's basically a combination of skills and character development. And here are some examples for SOTL grounded, and that's scholarship of teaching and learning. That's the science stuff I was talking about. SOTL proven approaches for encouraging and fostering critical thinking. And these are just examples, but you can see they sort of cluster into three areas. Problem-based learning, which involves case studies and different types of problem solving, as well as problem creation. Mentoring, and that's mentoring not just teacher-student relationship, but amongst peers and experiential opportunities. And discourse, which again has a wide variety of types of approaches regarding discourse. And what we see is that deep self-regulated learning is really a necessary corollary to critical thinking. And we have, in higher ed, we have both declarative and functioning knowledge that people need. Of course, they have to have the facts, the declarative knowledge to do their jobs, but they have to know what to do with that information. And that's the functioning knowledge. What can you do with what you know? And Biggs and Teng is one of my favorite go-tos for aligned constructive teaching and learning in higher education. So that's one of my favorite resources. And when we talk about deep self-regulated learning, we're talking about those higher order cognitive tasks, which many of us know as like the Bloom's taxonomy and everything that's happened since Bloom's. And it's about creating those self-motivated habits of lifelong learners, or fostering it, right? They might already have some, but we can help encourage them with more. And we keep talking in higher ed about having rigorous programs and academic rigor, and there's lots of different definitions of what that is. And a big chunk of them involve those considerations of cognitive complexity, critical thinking, and deep learning. So how do we support deep learning? You'll see here that there's some overlap and similarities with supporting critical thinking, which actually helps us as teachers, right? So we've got, okay, great, this specific thing that I'm going to involve and integrate into my classes will support not only critical thinking, but deep learning. So here again, you've got the discourse, the elaborative interrogation, you've got the self-explanation, which is discourse to yourself, worked examples and problem solving, interleave practice, based practice. There's a lot of these, and many of them are connected to constructivist philosophies of teaching and learning, which is my approach as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about specific examples now. So we went over some bases of pedagogy. I zoomed right through them. Happy to take any questions on those. But now we're going to talk about some specific examples relating to using NIST documents based on all of those theories and science that I talked about. And my approach is constructivist, and I use UDL and open education, which means I emphasize accessibility and student agency, active learning, aligned curricula, interleaved and spaced practice, authentic and applied assignments, and transparency of learning, learning theories, which you will actually see in these examples. We actually talk about why we're learning this way, and also metacognition and reflection. And I have personally used all of these examples I give in various modalities, online, synchronous, in class, which could be the hybrid model that some of you do as well, that where you have some students in the classroom and some students connecting remotely. So this example is an intro level one. It's a basic compare and contrast. In our program, we have the students utilize NIST 853, the CIS controls, and the cybersecurity framework throughout a number of courses. But based on our concepts of pedagogy, based on our UDL, based on our interleaved practice, based on our open education, we chunk the knowledge into accessible ways that we want them to go deep on. So it's not like they get these documents once and are expected to know everything about them. They get them based upon the topics of the modules in the different courses, and they do different things with them. And in this one, they get a preparatory activity. They have a mini lecture from the teacher where the teacher gives those interrogatories. They situate the role of these best practices and standards for those students who are lateraling in without any background or clue of any of these standards, because we have some who already work with them and some who have no idea what they are. And we emphasize, and here's the pedagogical part, that these learning activities are for analysis and extrapolation. It's about learned familiarity, being able to use these standards in a given context or scenario, not memorizing them. And we reference the professional goals. How are you going to be expected to be able to use these in a workplace? And we talk about those learning theories I just mentioned about why doing it this way is going to help them in the long run, and the science that backs it up. Now, for each of these slides, you will see on the left-hand side various categories where this has been used. So undergrad or graduate, this could work for either type of audience. Face-to-face, hybrid, high flex. The difference between hybrid and high flex: hybrid is when you could have synchronous students face-to-face in the classroom and students connecting at the same time, and you actually have set meeting times. High flex could be you have that, and you also have some students studying asynchronously on their own due to their own personal circumstances or situation that require that. So it's another layer of complication in the learning modality. This could be work for large or small classes. It could be open or not, and there's potential for peer review. I won't cover everything on the left in all of these slides, but that gives you an overview. You'll have the same sort of information for each of these examples. So with this example, the students read excerpts of other materials. They watch other videos related to the topic. For example, we'll have a topic on inventory and access, and it is an actual graded assignment. We actually, for this course, that's about what, 12.5% of the final course grade. So what do they actually do? This is an intro level course at the graduate, the example I'm giving you right now in our program. This is Security Measures 1, and the focus there is on preparedness and protection concepts. And it's a discussion board post, asynchronous, where they have all that preparatory activity already, and they have to choose a security measure or control from the course materials. And they have to look at it across all of those three documents, the two NISTs and the CIS controls, and compare and contrast. You know, what does it look like here? How is it talked about? How is it presented? How does it fit into what they've learned so far in cybersecurity policy and risk management? And how would this work in a really large organization or a really small organization? What are some of the approaches technically as well as organizationally in those two environments? And then you have to be very concise at a very high level of graduate writing. And this one's a written assignment, and high-level analysis of how this actually works, what you found with your solutions. And there can be substantive feedback with your peers. You could have peer review. There's lots of different things that can be done with that one. And there's follow-on activities. Teacher facilitated discussion in person or online. You incorporate the posts into the course materials. We've actually integrated this into later weeks and have students go back to those boards and build on something or pull out a problem that they've identified. The teachers refer back to things. And we also carry similar assignments for a different topic later. So they get practice and they become more familiar using these documents in a very critical, evaluative way. We also connect it to an exam in the course. And so that example is here, where it's a scenario-based exam. And they've already done that compare and contrast activity a couple times. They, again, have the pedagogical information, preparatory information, and they've become familiar with accepted abbreviations for these standards, right? So they're not writing out these big, long titles and forgetting what documents are called. And it's a timed exam with certain questions. So for example, describe one example of how gaps in organizational processes or procedures can make an organization vulnerable to harm. Really broad, but they have to detail a scenario. So here they're doing, they're creating the scenario of a problem. So here they're problem making in a timed exam situation. And then if you jump down to the third bullet point, for that example, they're also identifying a control and explaining how that control could help that organization, either prevent the vulnerability or mitigate the harm. And there's a second example in there as well. And for sake of time and to leave room for questions, I'm going to zoom to the next. I can't say Zoom anymore as a verb when in our Zoom environment. I'm going to hop to the next example, which is a more advanced way of using the NIST documents in our class for engagement and critical thinking. And sorry, jumped ahead a little too fast. And so this one is peer teaching. So this is the discourse, right? This is both for deep regulated learning and for critical thinking. The discourse is a very valuable exercise. And this requires them to do research, preparation, evaluation, so comparison, but also assessment. What do you think of this? And provide either written or oral deliverables, right? The peer teaching can be done both orally or written or both. And you have to have some preparatory activity, though. They need to have prior classes to understand the context. They need to understand the background of theories of risk and terminology, including enterprise risk management and governance. Advanced work with both of these documents, the cybersecurity framework and the risk management framework. And in prior courses, not just this one. And extensive practice using these documents, what's expected of them for high-level critical thinking. So what do they actually do? For example, they have to think, they get assigned to one of these 4 topics. And you'll see there's actually 2 topics, but each one is only looking at either the risk management framework or the cybersecurity framework. So we're looking at how well does the RMF address governance and due diligence, both internally to an organization and governance and due diligence in relation to supply chains, external partners, your regulator relationships, things like that, and explain it and give examples. And then you have to do the same thing for CSF if you're assigned to that second group. And the second category of questions is, how well does the risk management framework address cyber risk in all the tiers, tactical up to strategic, and explain and give examples? And by asking how well, we're requiring evaluation beyond just the facts. If we had just said, how does the RMF teach this? That's just factual, right? They're just reading something and spitting back the facts. But here we're requiring the how well. What do you think about this? Given all your prior knowledge, all your prior materials on enterprise risk management, on policy and risk management, what do you think about these 2 documents and how well they work together? And again, this is a peer teaching, so there's not a lot of instructor lecture here in advance. This is them relying on each other to teach them the answers and the students' opinions to these. It can be done in groups or individually, and it should be, it's a lot of work. So for us, for example, we give it as 15% of the course grade. And again, we use follow-up in the materials and assignments and lectures for later weeks. And I will go ahead and stop sharing now to allow me to check your questions.